Yes, hello, welcome back everybody. In this our ninth talk with Scott Killaby. Welcome back, Scott.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, meanwhile we met each other and we did a training together, and yeah, you are by far the most real and normal guy, spiritual awakened teacher that I met, and I really appreciate that. And in my history of working with teachers, I had teachers where he was very special, extremely special, with a special clothes and special chair, special pillow, special everything. And then where I was kind of very careful. I was very careful with him and make sure that I'm aware enough, because he sees me and I wouldn't say anything. So some kind of student position of being repressed, which was very similar to how I felt with my dad, interesting. And then as I progressed on the spiritual path, starting from a cult to more healthier options, I met other teachers where still, although they were not putting themselves as special, I would be like, yeah, man, this guy, he got it. He's enlightened. Like, oh man. And then as I got more mature, I found other people like Francis, where if go to a retreat, if you didn't know who Francis is, you wouldn't know who the teacher is, because he's just like everybody else and you wouldn't detect it. And yeah, and then I come, but still, even there, I would feel a little I mean, respectful reverence and a little repression, I think. some with my dad, And so with you,
With me, you don't have to respect me at all.
no, I have kind of deep reverence, because it's the same self, and it's just very helpful. I'm grateful. I mean, fucking grateful for having less suffering by following this methodology. But I felt like with some dude, with a guy, we are hanging out, and so that's very special. So thank you for that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Like authentic, unrepressed. I could talk about anything. You could talk about stuff that is like, oh wow, okay, I will definitely keep this confidential. So yeah, all right. So yeah, this series is for people who are interested in integrating awakening, enlightenment, awareness, teachings like non-duality or other things, Buddhism, Zen, teachings where the focus is on reaching Buddha nature, or discovering what we really are, or resting as what we are. I'm that. All of these high, powerful teachings, integrating them with processing our subconscious, basically, of the imprints of childhood, wounds, traumas that create addiction, limiting stories, which create contracted body, a sense of something is not right, I'm wrong, and it's not safe. So usually these are separated, these modalities, but even before I met you, I was on the same page. So when I met you, it gave me a thumbs up to keep going, like the need to integrate this stuff. So that's what we are doing here, psychotherapy or somatic psychotherapy. I don't really like the word psychotherapy. It's more like processing from awareness our childhood imprints, at the same time in the context of the self being not that, not the story, not the me feeling, not the ego, the self being what these non-dual teachings talk about. But I would like to focus this time on a topic which is very important, and maybe we can stay with that for a little bit: addiction. And I know that you developed through your own experience and study this model, the new model of recovery, for quite some time. When I encountered it, it seemed the most complete and sound to me, and I took it. Oh yeah, that's how it is. But I'm aware that this is not so known. So I would like to focus on that. And yeah, maybe from your understanding with yourself and also with studying and applying this for years, what do you understand by addiction? What, this it's a laden word, charged, and it's like addiction. Wow. Okay. So what do you mean by addiction or compulsion? And yeah, if you can go a little bit into this and start kind of shining light on the new model of recovery, maybe from a zoomed out, going more and more in and practical.
I think I might. It's funny because I defined it in my Natural Rest for Addiction book a certain way, but as the work is unfolded, really focusing on the drivers, the drivers being trauma drives it, self-limiting beliefs, deficiency stories is what we call it, drives it, shame, emotional repression, chronic pain, even boredom, things like that. So the way I would say it now would be like any repetitive or compulsive behavior that's driven by these drivers. It's that simple, because I don't even want to say drugs or alcohol or food or sex, because if you broaden it out some, like we have this iceberg graphic. I don't know if you've seen this yet, Mihai, the iceberg thing. Probably haven't. So with the iceberg graphic that we have, where just the tip of the iceberg is showing, just like an iceberg does. And at the tip of the iceberg is how the different ways that we go for relief. There's basically 3 categories, but only one of the categories is more like the classic addictions. So one of the categories is like drugs, alcohol, food, sex, porn, love addiction, things like that. And then but the other categories are maybe not so obvious. It's like, how else do we reach outside ourselves to essentially medicate unresolved things? Another one would be, well, this is also kind of addiction, is like going to the world or to relationships addictively or compulsively to try to get attention, love, approval, acknowledgement, fame, something like that.
Yeah,
so
in this all these dating sites, I mean, which it's very natural to use dating sites and all of that, but like, I had this in the past. It just was compulsion, some compulsion, or Facebook, being on Facebook scrolling, can't stop it. Yeah, people going out to the bar to get to just get attention or get love or get to be wanted. Netflix.
Yeah. And certain people who may not have a drug or alcohol or food issue might not recognize that as kind of a similar pattern, like, because it's a little bit hidden and we don't talk about it as much. But
yeah.
And then the third category, I don't even know if you want to call it addiction, but it's like how we just go into our head anyway, into belief systems, thinking as a way as to avoid the somatic experience. So all of it is like the ways in which we stay out of the body, the things at the tip of the iceberg. So at the what's under the iceberg in the graphic is all the somatic work that we tend to have to do, the deep inquiry we have to do to resolve those drivers. So under the iceberg are the drivers: trauma, deficiency stories, shame, emotional repression, any kind of emotional issue. So with the new model, we focus on the drivers essentially, because we can see that the drivers, and the science helps us with that, tells us that these drivers are there. And so we just focus on that. It could be any compulsive or repetitive behavior, something driven by those things. So that's pretty broad, actually.
Yeah. Hey, meanwhile, I found this. It's like an actual real image. I don't know if you...
Yeah. Exactly like that.
It's
so
an iceberg.
Most of the work is under the iceberg. Is the reason we use the iceberg, because the surface is just the surface. It's what shows up as behavior. Yeah.
Hey, I'll just back up a little bit, because I know and I know, but for some people this is new. Yeah, also when we say that the drivers are these basically unresolved emotional issues, chronological triggers, as you call it, like hurt and betrayals and abandonment and being criticized often, and the deficiency stories, these are the drivers, meaning that basically or unresolved trauma or emotional repression and any emotional psychological issues that are actually, whenever we have those, it's unpleasant, it's painful, there is some degree of suffering, basically suffering in the mind with some negative thoughts about oneself, or some limiting, difficult thoughts about the world of relationship, we suffer, and then we have in the body some somatic sense of unpleasantness. So basically, in this model, we don't focus on cutting the behavior or saying, "Oh, come on, man, you said you're going to stop, and you just you started using again, you relapsed 3 days ago. Come on, man." So we are not shaming them. We are not focusing on the actual behavior most of the time, because basically the understanding is that it's useless to do that, because actually all of those drivers, why we call it drivers to suffering, so the addiction is just some innocent way to temporarily alleviate some unpleasant emotional, psychological, somatic state, to escape for a moment. And we notice that everybody here who has a little bit of experience with addiction, I think, and we have more experience with it than we think. Yeah, it's some temporary relief. And even in stuff which is very harmless, like, oh, I'm going to go have some hot chocolate in the middle of the night, or some chips, or sugar, or calling a friend. I have to call a friend, So all of these activities can come from, Francis talks about it, a lot of these things you can do the same activity coming from celebration. Like, hey, I'm okay. I like life. I'm going to have a beer now, and I'm going to watch a movie, and then I'm going to date, and whatever. It comes from a fullness and celebration of life. The same activity can be coming out of sense of lack, and that I want to escape this. I can't. I want to escape this, and I discovered this thing. Oh, this binging here, or yeah. So I wanted to mention that. So it's an innocent escaping. Because how it works with consciousness is that, so when the state of lack or state of yuckiness in the body due to unprocessed trauma, all the drivers, when it comes, it sucks the focus of awareness into that, and then there's a resistance, like, oh, I don't want this. Yeah? And then if we focus on an object and we merge with an object, like a spliff, or a weed, or tobacco, or vodka, or a movie, or porn, then temporarily the attention goes on that, and temporarily the pain goes down, and I get some relief, but then the pain goes back up. Perhaps I have now shame and guilt about it, which you discovered that actually shame about an addictive behavior becomes like fueling the compulsion.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I just wrote a few things down. So
I'm just putting out. I'm what I understood from your model. I'll give it back to you.
Yeah. Well, something that came up for me is, so the way that we approach this is if someone's doing deep inquiry. So if someone's not doing deep inquiry, they're not really doing this model. And so
yeah,
you may respond differently to them. I don't know, because what I've seen is, like, if someone's not doing the deep work on the drivers, they're not doing this work. This is not, so that's just using, for example.
Yeah.
Right? There may be a different response to those people. I don't know. But what we're talking about is when people are taking responsibility, for the most part, for their suffering and their addiction, where they're to the place where they're not in the business so much of blaming others or projecting out, and they recognize that it's something that they have to deal with. And so they're kind of taking responsibility for that. And then when someone's in that process is when we want to fully support them in that process. No shaming, no judgment, no control, because they're already taking responsibility for it. It's a matter of just supporting them in that process. That might be different than someone who's not doing any inquiry at all and just drinking a lot. And some of the new model stuff doesn't apply as much, although the non-judgment, non-shaming helps. Even if someone is just using, is shaming and judgment tends to drive people into secrecy even more.
Yes.
So, but again, I just want to make sure that we're being clear about that the new models for people are actually looking at the drivers and how to support them in doing this. And then you made another point, like around smoking weed or drinking alcohol, how it comes from a different place. The thing is with inquiry now, we can determine whether we're smoking something or drinking something or using something out of a driver or just because as a celebration, and it feels different in the body.
Mhm.
So one thing we've been able to do, each of us doing this work, is to go into inquiry when we have a craving or desire for something, just to take a look at it. Is this connected to something? You know, am I feeling something? Like you said, is there some energy coming up from my story, my program, some trauma, something that I'm using that to medicate, which is just fine too. That sometimes we do that even in new model, we do that. But there is a difference between that and smoking weed or drinking when you're not coming from a driver. And I think the big difference is the lack of compulsivity.
Yes.
So you might have a beer, but you don't necessarily want to keep drinking. Or
Yes.
you might smoke weed, but not necessarily want to do it every day. And I think that's one of the signs of it, is like if you're celebrating with that instead of using it compulsively.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes.
Say those two things.
Yeah, give me a moment here. Yeah, you discovered on your own skin, and I discovered it with people and myself, the external pressure as being another driver, which actually pushes addiction deeper into secrecy, meaning that people in my life or spouses or somebody's like, dude, come on, you can't do this. You got to stop. You got to go to AA. You got to go to therapy, man. You got to go to therapy. You can't fuck up your life. Look at your kids. Anyway, so from the pain of the bystanders or people impacted, there's a lot of pressure for the person to go somewhere. And actually this backfires, because then it prevents them from going to recovery from their own inner yes. So they're going, oh, okay, I'll go so that she gets off my, but then, yeah, so this actually becomes a driver. So it's important, ideally, if the person recovering or working with addiction in this new model, ideally the family to be involved, maybe do some work too, or at least, like I work now with someone that both people are interested in KI and in this work, and so at least to have a session with the spouse and educate them. Hey, he's not doing this because he's bad, or because he doesn't love you, or because he's immoral, or because he's a piece of shit and doesn't respect you. No, he's doing this or that because of pain, and all this happened to him, and that's what comes out. It would be really helpful if somehow, yeah, not to put pressure on them, not to shame them, not to judge them. At the same time, it's tricky because one can still have boundaries and have safety. You can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, so I'm just thinking about parents out there, or like a spouse where you have somebody who's drinking or using heavy drugs, and for whatever reason, if they use that, they become aggressive or violent. So you would, that's a situation where you have to take care of yourself. If you have a spouse or you have a child who's violent towards you, you may have to set a boundary, and you may have to even say some things like, this behavior, I can't allow this to go on, we don't feel safe if you're doing this. So there's definitely exceptions to that. But even with that, so I had a friend who would drink and sometimes would become aggressive when he drank. So when I was speaking to him about that, what I was saying is that, okay, if I move away from you when you're drinking, that's for my safety. It's not, but for a while, he didn't understand that. He kept thinking, well, if you're seeking safety, then you're judging me for drinking. And I had to make sure that he understood and felt from me. It's about feeling energetically that I wasn't judging, that wasn't coming from me, that it was just about seeking safety. So there's a skillful way to set those boundaries, even with someone who's in an unskillful way. And sometimes you have to follow up with people to make sure that they're not just interpreting it as like, okay, I'm a bad person again. But so there's an exception. But for the most part, you can just, if you're not in, here's the thing to think about. If you're not in physical jeopardy by someone around you, if it's not a safety issue, then it's a really good time to look at what is going on for you. So the anxiety where's that coming from? Because the anxiety is not because you feel physically unsafe. It's because you want the other person to get well so that you'll so your anxiety will go away, or so that you'll
Yeah.
feel better. And that's where it gets tricky, when it's not about physical safety and we're trying to fix somebody, codependency or otherwise, trying to fix somebody, but it's backfiring the whole time because we're not skillful with it. And because we're not dealing with our stuff, we're trying to make the other person get better so that that'll somehow make us better, but that doesn't work very well.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting, the case that Vinettu described, also that person might have what is called attachment wounds, where they were abandoned or rejected or neglected. So when you feeling afraid for safety, you need to go, this can easily trigger them, oh, I'm abandoned again. Because probably the drinking or the acting out comes from some unresolved abandonment. And now you are saying, dude, I can't take, even if you say in a nice way, it'll be like, it will be some, he's leaving me. So then I'm going to drink more, and it contributes to driver. So it's important to mention, listen, I'm not leaving you. I love you. I care about you. I'll go and I'll come back tomorrow morning. Okay. Got it. And then again, so that will help, I guess. So we're not putting more gas on the fire, if that's an option. Yeah. I guess another element here is this new model of recovery. I can see that actually it theoretically appears in other models. I mean, when we talk about models, there's like the ethical, moral model that you are just messed up, or the medical model is that you are sick, or it's also like in the 12th step, which I highly respect. The 12th step is like an evolutionary modality. It's like a spiritual disease, a spiritual model. And so, and other models, psychotherapeutical models, and so this new model of recovery, like in some degree, there has some overlaps. Like theoretically in 12-step group, although they praise on sobriety days, they praise on that, and at the same time, theoretically, if you relapse and you fuck up, they are theoretically saying, hey, welcome back here, we love you, you come as you are, we are here for you. So that offers some of this unconditional acceptance, not saying, oh man, what the fuck, so that's, I don't know if it's actually, it happens like that, or maybe people energetically disapprove. But also I can see in the 12th step, I mean, if somebody is radically doing the steps with a wise sponsor, you are going the 4th step, which is the inventory and the this and the that, and you take ownership. And so I remember I worked with someone doing your model yesterday, and they had intense guilt and shame, and they use a lot of drugs, a lot of stuff. And I wasn't focusing on drugs, and there was something in the heart, and I unpacked it using KI, mine it out, and it will say, you are selfish, you are a liar, you are like this. And I was like, hey man, can you just see that? Let it be here. Let it be true for now. Let it be, And as I was doing that from awareness, I could see that's like somatic 4th step right there, we are doing here,
Yeah, right.
But I think you mentioned that, if we focus on sobriety as a badge of recovery, that may lead the process astray, because one can white knuckle it or willpower it away, or even willpower with the will of the group. And somehow I'm kind of controlling the compulsion. The drivers are still there, and I end up being a sober, unhappy person. So it seems like in your new model, we want more than that. We don't want just sobriety. We want happiness, inner peace, clear body. Like, yeah, I love life. Not like, oh man, 20 years. I haven't drank 20 years. How is it going your life? Oh man, it's like shitty. I'm unhappy. So we don't want that.
Right. the other thing too is like when we're focusing on sobriety, sometimes just the focusing on that will get us not focusing on the somatic, because there's just the focus issue, first of all.
Yeah.
Just what's important to you in recovery. If what's important to you only is not using, then if that's really important, you'll focus there, and then you may miss the fact that their drivers are still active. So that when you do resume use, or relapse as they call it, you spiral down quickly, because the drivers weren't being focused on. So they're still there. Pick up that drink. The brain remembers that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep doing this. So again, just having the focus on the behavior rather than the drivers may make relapses worse, what we've seen. Because with the new model, the relapses often aren't as bad because, well, one, we're not shaming and judging when it happens. And two, we're focusing on the drivers anyway. So if a relapse happens, that helps us illuminate what are the drivers that were active right then. See, without the relapse, we don't even have that material sometimes. We don't know. We're not welcoming relapse, but when it happens, we call it resuming use. When it happens, we can go back and look and see what is it that we're missing. There's something here that maybe drove that we can take a look at. And then, the addict and the sobriety thing. Certainly, like, freedom from addiction is what we all want, and no matter what recovery model it is, we're all on the same page in that way, and we don't have to be against each other. But how we go about that is, so for example, if, early in recovery, calling yourself an addict or identifying with that might be really helpful, because for whatever reason, it may give you a break for a moment. It's like,
from lying to oneself, or deceiving oneself, or not owning it, saying no, I'm good. So you need to take that. I'm fucked. That will be first good step.
It might be a good first step, but then the addict identity itself, which is a form of a deficiency story, it can easily become that, like, there's something fundamentally wrong with me. It's just like any other self-limiting belief. And then that plays into the driver, because the deficiency stories drive the compulsion. So if we start to believe that we're an addict, we hang our hat on that identity. Then, for example, if we do use, the identity, who we thought we were, is completely obliterated in that moment. And that's a struggle for people, because it's like they thought that they were that. I'm the recovering addict, and then all of a sudden now I can't be that. So that actually can make the relapse worse, because now it's like the relapse proves that I'm deficient. It proves that I'm an addict, and therefore reinforces the driver. And the same thing is true, and that's just connected to sobriety. The same thing is that we all like sobriety if it's healthy and it brings like an enjoyment of life and all that stuff. But if we're just holding back the dam of the addiction and counting days, then that can be a setup for us. Is when if we do resume use here again, it all comes back, because we've been focusing on sobriety. So we don't, here's the thing they say, we don't tell people to use, we don't tell them not to use, we don't usually give any kind of suggestion on that. We let people find their way, but if they do resume use, we use those probably more than in any other model, because we don't just say, okay, you relapsed, nothing wrong with you. We say all those things, like non-shaming things, but we go deeper with it. We say, no, let's get under what was there. And like almost a gratitude that the resuming use happened, because it might illuminate something that we couldn't see before.
It's an opportunity to explore deeper. And maybe, I remember that Francis was talking about, okay, you fall back into separation or you lose it. Okay, great. We can do autopsy afterwards. So okay, before you went to a bar or before you did the meth, so what was happening? I was like, just feeling like shit. Okay, well, memory of that, I'm unworthy. I remembered how my mother beat me, and then how all of this. So yeah, it's an opportunity to go now towards what drove the suffering and process that, basically. And the more we process, I guess that's the idea. I mean, that's the idea in this model of processing the drivers, is these drivers are like some kind of fuel, some high octane fuel of suffering. And as long as they are there, they're going to be, whenever there's an opening, going for the relief. So now we are trying to go, not focus on behavior, and actually process, okay, the abandonment, process the I'm unloved, process the molestation, the war trauma, the process that to the point that it gets less charged, less charged, and then there will be less fuel for the compulsion. And then that's what I like in your model. Just doing the driver's work, there will be some natural falling away of the desire, not because of willpower, but it's more like, okay, somehow, because it's not so exciting anymore because I don't need it so much, right?
Exactly. There's a somatic change, what I've noticed. Like, it literally is different in your body. So like if I drink a glass of wine, which I do every now and then, it feels different in my body than it used to. It used to feel like it would just cover up some very uncomfortable sensations and it just numb them out. But if those sensations are not there, it doesn't work in the same way. So you become pretty sensitive to the intoxicating effect, more sensitive to it when the energy is flowing freely in your body, where it almost feels like, I don't know, this isn't science, but it's like, it feels like, this is my rough way of saying it. It's like when you have a contraction or a chronic pain, it's almost like it absorbs the substance. It's like everything goes there to kind of medicate. It doesn't really go there, but if that's not there, then it doesn't, it's like, it doesn't do that anymore. And so then the energy is flowing freely in your body, and it's not, the intoxicating thing isn't going anywhere. It's like, it's not medicating any particular place. So the desire there for more of it isn't there. And the other thing is, like, yes, we look at the drivers, like we look at, for example, okay, we might go back and say, when you were about to take the meth, what were you believing? All the drivers are relevant, but we also get people in this work, we encourage them to look at it before they use. That's a big thing. So sometimes if you'll just do inquiry before, you'll see the driver in real time instead of doing it afterwards, like aftermath. Like right when I want to drink a beer, whether I drink a beer or not, the point is, can I look into what this is connected to? Is there something that I'm feeling in my body that hasn't been investigated? And then that alone might give us a sense of choice around the thing. As the compulsion comes down, it feels like there's more choice. But even if we do drink, then there's aftermath. So even if the compulsion came way down and we still have a drink, afterwards, here come the deficiency stories and the shame. So it's like, I failed again. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Or I feel ashamed. And then the drivers reinforce themselves from the resuming use. So it's inquiry before and after to clean that up. And part of what we clean up, this is an interesting thing that I find, is that for people who have an addictive pattern, if you ask them, do you believe you're addicted? They'll say almost always yes. And for people who don't have that pattern, who just smoke weed every now and then or drink, they'll say, no, I don't believe I'm addicted. And there's science behind that, because they did a study where they said, they revealed that people who believe they're addicted actually have more of the pattern in their life. Now, the question is like, which, the chicken or the egg? It's like, is it just that the pattern is there? So my belief that I'm an addict is just reporting on the pattern? Or is the belief there, so it manifests the pattern, it keeps continuing? And I think it's somewhat of the latter, because I don't believe I'm addicted to alcohol or painkillers. So when I've taken those things, it didn't pick up. And you see, but other things where I have been addicted or the compulsion remained, if I would ask myself, or an inquiry like, I'm not addicted to this, mine would say yes, yes. So you can track it that way. Like, what do you believe you're addicted to? And chances are there's the pattern acting. So that goes back to inquiry on the belief of being an addict, of the identity that gets formed around it. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. So, although on the first step might be good to own and some accountability and being real. Yeah, man, I'm addicted. But then, I mean, I'm addicted is one thing, but I'm an addict. It's another thing. And then to maintain this, it becomes like it's a deficiency story, basically. I'm an addict, or I'm a recovering addict, although that's more empowering. It's still, from the non-dual point of view and the point of view of true identity, that's bullshit. And it's a big limitation. I'm not an addict. I am this divine aware presence in which there is some addiction happening. Yeah. So if I constrict it, I'm an addict, then it's going to manifest. You talk about manifestation some recently. So what we hold in mind, I had the teacher David Hawkins, he would say this thing as a mantra, but it's a true fact that, hey, guys, I am infinite divine being, only subject to what I hold in mind. So if I believe this, then my divine infinite being is going to make it happen, you know? So it's important what labels we put on ourselves.
Absolutely. And here's another thing that I love about this model is that you can track your addiction, and in other words, your external behavior. Let's just use words like external behavior means like what I actually drink, the things that I use or whatever, that behavior. You can track that against your interior experience quite directly. So for example, what we say to people is, if you're still drinking compulsively, there are drivers still there. So you really shouldn't expect anything else, you know? And so I think in other recovery models, it's a bit of a guessing game. It's like, I got to put down the substance, even though the interior stuff isn't resolved, and sort of guess at this and hope that that works. But you don't have to guess here, because chances are it's still going to be compulsive if you have the drivers. Yes. So you can literally check into your awareness to see, oh, this is why the pattern's showing up. And this to me is a more mature view of addiction, so that we don't do this guessing game anymore, and we don't wonder why we're still addicted. It's not a mystery anymore. It's like the drivers are there. That's why you're addicted. And that also helps in the recovery piece, because as you start to let go of behaviors, you're going to see a corresponding letting go of the drivers at the same time. You can literally track it inside and outside or one. And that way you can follow it that way. So that's nice. It gives you a map for your recovery. It tells you kind of exactly where you're at with it along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I saw this over and over with people that I work with, and in myself that I work with, Mihai. Yeah, I had phases. So I would say I have light, or I would used to have light addictions, light as compared to other people I work with, but still it's the same phenomena. But I could see that sometimes I would be, you know what? No, I can't do this. So I would just stop out of, I would say, no, I have to do this. It's not in alignment with my spiritual path. I'm fooling myself. I'm pursuing enlightenment. And then I'm doing all this shit. No. So there comes some spontaneous no. And then I'm somehow able to do it. You know, I'm not smoking for months and months. And I feel okay. But two things happen. One thing is that I quit this, yeah, it's okay. And then I start to do more of that. It switches to the other one. I quit the other one, and now that one, it comes back now. I do it more every day. So the chameleonizing of the object of relief, I noticed that. And that's okay if especially it's a harm reduction. You know, maybe instead of doing heroin, we're going to do kratom, or instead of doing 2 liters of wine per day, to do 4 bottles a week. Okay. Or anyway, so I noticed that shifting. Another thing I noticed, that after maybe 4 months of not using smoking weed, I thought, okay, well, I do want to smoke weed from time to time, you know? So I'm just going to use maybe once a week, twice a week for special times. And within short time, we'll go back to how it used to be. Like I'll go back business as usual, because I have not processed my drivers. I still had choked grief for me and my father and all the men in my life, repressed fear, unfully processed attachment wounds, you know? So what do you expect? Yeah, if you notice anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been like different drugs or different substances are different. Like if I notice drivers aren't with particular substance, it doesn't mean that they're not, different drivers aren't there with other substances. It's strange. But like, I don't know how you picked up certain things, but like when I picked up certain things as a kid, they were around certain times in my life when something was going on. Like when I was bullied, it's when I first picked up, shortly after that, weed, alcohol, tobacco. And there were particular stories going on around that, like the trauma had affected me. So working with those particular stories unhooked me from some of those. But then other ones would sneak in. And I just found that for me, the drivers weren't totally resolved. So that's fine. It just told me that. It's like, well, there's still something here for me to look at. That's why I'm substituting. But just looking at the unique drivers behind a particular substance, you might find more something there that you didn't find under something else. So for me, tobacco was about connection.
It's interesting that I have a friend who I did the KI with him, with her, and it came right away. Tobacco is my friend. That came from within. Like, this is my friend. So I'm alone and feeling no connection. I'm going with it, and it's like home. Like it came like this. It's a phrase, just like as you said it.
Yeah. So I guess what to say to people is that's what's so good about this work is that you can get very specific under a particular substance. Like you can find out exactly what are the stories or programs that drive that. And then it's not as much of a mystery. You know, I like that because I think in the older, when I was in 12-step, it felt like a mystery. Like nothing about 12-step. It's just period. It's been mysterious. Why, if I want to not use something, why do I keep doing it? Like, but now it isn't a mystery now. Just seeing that these stories connect right up with it.
Yeah. You know, due to circumstances as conditions, I haven't been addicted to any substances at all, and I haven't used substances until mid-30s. And I thought I was very pure, and I didn't even understand this addiction. I didn't know what it meant, and I thought they're people really messed up who have this. So, but looking back, there was you know, also shopping, addiction to wanting new stuff, to buy some new stuff. You know, the sense of lack, the sense of existential lack, or whatever. All the skeletons, I didn't know they are there in the basement. I didn't know there is a basement. so shopping, or love addiction, you know, and kind of projecting all of this. It's going to be okay if I'm with this person. It's going to make it all okay, and it's never okay. Sexual stuff, and then this, you know, I have this shirt. I like it a lot, but you know, Advaita addict. Addiction to practicing, and you know, I can see it's tricky because it's noble and meritorious. How do you call it? Anyway, with merit, to dedicate your life to, let's say, self-remembering. I used to be dedicated to this practice, self-remembering and mindfulness, and do mindfulness from early morning till you go to bed, and do this all the time. I think there is something earnest and powerful in that, some evolutionary impulse. But at the same time, I was addicted to these things. And then as YouTube happened, I could see that I just go addicted to non-duality videos and seeing all the time, you know, and from one angle that's going under the radar. Just whenever there's a moment to put some non-duality videos, feel a little loneliness, put some non-duality videos, you know, put Muji, Rupert, Eckhart, Scott, this or that, you know, feeling a little sad, non-duality videos. so it's worth to be mentioned. Or going to retreats, I have to do this one, I have to do another one, I have to do, why? Yeah, okay, get transmission, get this, be with the sage, whatever, but it's like, I'm not okay, and it's gonna make it okay, you know? And I think you probably observed this too, this spiritual seeking addiction and spiritual practice addiction and satsang addiction.
I would say it's no different than any of the other ones in the iceberg.
Yeah.
I mean, it is more noble and it can bring us great freedom, obviously.
Yeah.
But the same drivers are there. When I work with people, when you get to the root of what am I looking for, what's driving it, it comes back to trauma, self-limiting beliefs, the same stuff. So I don't know how that message is received out there, because I think sometimes we think, we get told even, that it's coming from just this pure desire for truth, right? And sometimes maybe that's mixed in there, but I have a sense that's actually also being driven by
Yes.
these drivers. And even as noble as we like to make it, it's still just an addiction like anything else. So in my own experience, what happened is I was addicted to painkillers and alcohol, and all the hard drugs really went downhill, and then got clean off of those, but didn't deal with the drivers. So gonna seek enlightenment. Okay, now I woke up to my true self. Surely it's all gone now. No, what happened was whatever hadn't been seen started showing up as a sex compulsion. So it has a way of showing it all to you, whether you've awakened to awareness or not, it's still going to show itself to you. It's all perfect in the end because all the different addictions got to show me something. But there's another topic there that we won't probably get into, which is just waking up to your true nature doesn't necessarily end all addictions. And let's put that myth to rest.
Yes.
If that's out there.
Yes, that's important, because now, we think of addiction, but also talking to audience, like we were like that, we are like that like seeking the self and enlightenment, okay, or whatever, awakening. So there is the misunderstanding that is spread, or somehow lack of information that this happens, that will be like some ultimate drug, basically. That's what it is. I would have attained this state that is going to be the ultimate thing, and I'm going to be forever at peace, forever as a state. So it doesn't work like that. It's bullshit. But also, even if we attain to the real attainment, like realizing deeply that we are that which is looking, that which is aware, and that is a real attainment of what was already there all along, and this brings relief and wisdom, and many things fall away. I agree with you. There can still be stuff lurking there which will prevent to be at peace, to enjoy life, to be okay. So there can be, that's why for me, I really, working with Francis and Rupert and all the previous stuff before, but especially with Francis, I really got it. And that made a lot of patterns, of ego patterns, fall away. Things that used to harass me, they were gone. But still, it didn't go to, let's say, birth trauma. It didn't go to attachment disruption trauma, loss of like this. I didn't even know that there is repressed grief and repressed fear, repressed anger, I didn't know that there is a belief in my ego structure. I have to control this. I have to. So they didn't get to it. They didn't get to me, like, I guess with Ramana, maybe got to it. It was so strong, or with Eckhart Tolle, just blasted. They say these things. Sometimes the building can collapse like in one fell swoop. Bam! But with most people, it's just a crack here, a crack there, a wall here, a wall there, and it will take 20 years for all to come down. But your method that discovered, it's like you kind of knocking it off, knocking it here, a little dynamite there, a little thing. Yeah.
Well, because what else do you do if the recognition of awareness doesn't knock it all out? What are you going to do? You can't keep coming back to awareness. I mean, you can, but it's still going to be hidden. So
that's what I did. That's what I thought. Oh, okay, there's still something. I'm still a sense of lack. Okay, I need to maybe go again. 2 weeks retreat, maybe a month retreat, maybe Vipassana. I need to practice more. Okay, what's wrong with me? Maybe I'm not spiritual enough. So it creates some non-dual spiritual deficiency identity,
Mm-hmm. The other thing is like the seeking awakening, though, is that one addiction that can finally bring you down into your body.
Yeah.
So this is something interesting because like all the other addictions that I did not do that. They repressed emotion or numbed it out. So I got to avoid it all. But this was the one addiction where, and I didn't know that was going to happen because I was just waiting for the big moment to be like, once that happens, then what do you mean come down in the body? It'll all be seen through at that point. Mm-hmm. But what happened is that awareness came on. It allowed me to finally go into the body. So that's different than the other addictions for sure. But
Yeah.
where it can get messed up is that as we awaken to awareness, some people still struggle with coming down into the body because there's still that avoidance thing that was always there. You know, the seeking to avoid is still there, and now it's seeking to embody or to not embody
Yes.
something by avoiding. So there's all kinds of, you know, traps along the way. Even if you've woken up to your true nature, there's traps in that if your programming won't allow you to come down in and get to the roots of these things.
Yes, some connected to some some partial teaching or incomplete teaching. Basically, that there's not trauma informed or somatic informed, that the teacher doesn't speak about that, or if somebody brings up the topic that there's contraction or there is this thought, the teaching says, well, it's not real. There's nothing. That's what I was told from a very wonderful teacher I still like a lot and love. To say, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You are this divine aware being. It's a story. Are you that, or are you that which is aware of it? At that time, I already knew that, and so I was like, man, I kind of was like, I want to say fuck you, but I didn't, because I have respect and reverence for this person. But I could see that, yeah, this is not helping me. And I told, hey, I know that I'm that, but this is not helping me.
Yeah. So here's another thing about that, because you hear like Jonathan Hari, he was a speaker, has been a speaker who's come out to say connection and unconditional love are the antidote to addiction. And I think that's pretty accurate. But my thing is if there's no, so if you awaken to awareness or you do these processes, it's the traumas and the deficiency stories that are so disconnecting in our lives. Like these are the shame. This is what disconnects us from each other.
Yeah.
So we're holding this stuff in the body. So, you know, these idealistic things that we say to people, like it's all illusion, is an idealistic thing. Because if it's not your experience, it's an ideal. It doesn't meet your experience. If you say unconditional love and connection are the answer, that's an ideal until it's your experience. So how do we make it our experiences? We have to come down and find the blocks to that, like in the body, so that the ideal becomes our experience. And then maybe we'll be able to say with authenticity, yes, it's all illusion. I've seen that now. But until then, you keep your money where the mouth is. Or what's the phrase? Keep your money where the mouth is. Like, stay true to your experience. Don't say things that are idealistic if that's not your experience, because it probably won't lead you anywhere fruitful. To just say these idealistic things without doing the work that's necessary to truly transform out of these patterns.
Yes. I could see that teacher is probably free from all of that. And I could see obvious that it's like that, and could see me, how this is bullshit. And I also knew this is bullshit, but somehow, so it's not that they were right. She was right. It's just that it wasn't so helpful to address my particular pain. And and I was encouraged to transcend, to unfocus attention from the story or from the contraction, and to rest as that in which it appears. So whenever shit comes up, come out of the shit and be that in which the shit appears. And then I kept doing that, and it works. Especially if I'm with her, it works. And I'm like, oh yeah, unraveling shit. I'm like, yeah. But then next day something happens, you know. So this pitfall of transcendence, and some kind of, even in very good non-duality teachings that I respect and recommend, like, hey, don't go to the mud. Don't go too much into the mud. That's actually, some teacher that I really like and respect. Although there is this understanding that, hey, there's a lot of stuff in your body, There's the me feeling, the ego structure is embedded layers and layers in the body. You know, in the Francis Rupert tradition, Jean Klein, they speak about, you need to clear this. Awakening through nature is just 35% of the journey. You need to clear this. Yeah, okay. And they have some methodology to do that. But there is also this thing like, hey, if it doesn't come out, don't go there. Don't, if it doesn't come up, don't go to the mud, because you may get lost in there. You are wallowing in what's not real. If it comes up, yeah, let it devour you. But if it doesn't come up, don't go there. And I could see that that's a problem with that, because some things will never come up. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe if I go to like a 2-year retreat with enlightened masters living with him, maybe it'll come up. But yeah, so I disagree with that approach. And
well, it's also just not good science at this point to say, don't go into things that you've repressed, the mud. Like, we now have the science that's saying it's just not healthy. Like, forget spiritual awakening. It's just not healthy on a physical and mental health level to not deal with these things that we've pushed away. So this seems to be like a throwback from a few hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago, before we knew more about the body and repression. So the same party line is getting spoken over and over again, even in the face of all this evidence about the mud, you know? So sooner or later, the teachers are going to have to start reading these scientific studies and bringing their teaching in alignment with it some more, I think. And that's all it is, I think, is just paying attention more to some of the things we've learned in humanity recently about this. Yeah.
But you see, you wouldn't have unless you had intense chronic pain. You know, there is so liberating the resting as presence. Yeah. And then to the point also, you don't have the seeking anymore. You don't read books. You don't want anything. And this worked for me. And for some people, it did. I don't know what, you know, they did this work in a different way, and they are like not interested. So there's no incentive. You had incentive, addiction, pain. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point, because maybe some people didn't have to go through all that. That's a good point. Like, and so maybe, you know, and a lot of this is innocent. I don't think any teacher is doing anything with ill will or anything. I don't think it's nothing like that. Now, I can't say all of them are good intention, but most of them are. They're just missing something. But maybe they didn't have to go there themselves. Maybe that's it. They didn't have to. Yeah. But the problem with that then is what we call bias. And our bias is something in our facilitation program that we're always aware of, and we train on it. Bias is the assumption that if something was like a certain way for me, that it's going to be like that for you. And that doesn't meet the person where they are. So, I mean, teachers don't often see their own bias, you know, because they're not coming to a training program where we're saying, hey, check this out. Because even though you woke up through all of this at once, the great majority of people don't have that experience. So when you put your bias on them, you're sharing only your personal experience. That's all that you're sharing. But if you share it as a way, as if it's truth, that's a bias. See, because the bias is like, my experience is like yours. Everybody's experience is different around this. So that's what I think we're talking about. Yeah, just getting rid of the bias and understanding people are different. They need different practices, and not telling them right off the bat that it's all illusion if they haven't seen that yet. Yeah,
yeah. And you know, there is this in this more like some of these non-dual teachings, which they are not neo-Advaita. There's awareness that there's a deeper embodiment work. And so in these teachings, what happens, you go to a retreat with the teacher, and it happens for everybody that stuff come up during physical yoga sessions, or during just in the night, their pain come up. And they are processed somehow there. And I remember that I stayed with Francis in his house, and the retreat was wonderful. And then I remember that people will go home, and I will stay there. I'll be there. And then as soon as there's nobody, and I'll go to my room, something will come up, like something is not right. Something is missing. There's something. And then also, because I decided not to medicate anything, I was like, very uncomfortable, and all this stuff will come up somehow. And which is true, let's say in a higher energy field, I don't know, more the transmission, whatever, the unresolved stuff are pulled out of you usually. However, what I like with KI is that, okay, do that, but then continue on your own. Keep mining out until there's nothing, until, you know, don't wait for now in 3 months again. Let it pull out of you, you know. It's really subtle stuff if you consider what the stuff that we inquire into. Like,
if you're waiting for something to come up, you may not even be aware that, for example, there's a program running in your system just about having people close to you, like, or how you relate to people, like a feeling of unsafety that you're not even fully conscious of, like
Yeah.
maybe really under the radar. Or for me, it was like, I don't trust people. And those kinds of programs were way under the radar. So I was living in awareness, really kind of fooling myself to a certain degree, because these programs were running, affecting everything in my life in a way. They were affecting the addiction for sure, but I wasn't able to uproot them. So the way that it shows up is like, you could be sitting next to someone and you're just in awareness, and you don't even see that there's something there. It's when we get down to the somatic is when you start really seeing these programs that are operating unconsciously with all of us, and that's affecting our ability to connect with people. It's reinforcing aloneness and disconnection, these very subtle stories that show up. And I think I don't know how to wait for that to happen, because they won't. If you wait, they may never show themselves. It may always just be like a little bit of discomfort here or there, or pain, without really knowing what it is. So we bring it up here instead of just waiting. Yeah.
Because otherwise, actually Rupert and Paul Hederman, they talk about this. I mean, addiction to YouTube videos. And Paul Hederman is like, dude, how many retreats you need to go to? Hey, it should be nice to have an intervention. For cocaine and alcohol, there's an intervention. But he would like to have some intervention squad going to satsangs and say, hey, dude, this is number 53, enough, pull him out. This is, like to pull him out of that. So I'm glad to report, I mean, after this year of getting deeper this work with you, and I think a lot of the teachers I was following, some of them I'm like, I can't do it, like I just can't do it anymore. So I still have some that they are doing the being, the transcendental, that I still make sense to me, but some are going off. Also the YouTube stuff is going off, the practice is going off, because I guess the drivers are diminishing. That's the thing. The driver is not that I found now some ultimate teaching. Now Scott Kilby is the ultimate teaching. No. Through this modality, the driver is gone. So I'm like, what the fuck? I don't want to keep listening to YouTube all the time. I want to do archery. I want to meet friends. I want to go out.
Yeah. And the thing is you're only going to get so much from watching my videos. Once you get my spiel, you've got it. And it really, the spiel is about standing in your own integrity and your own autonomy and looking at your stuff. That's what the overall message is. So I was going to ask you, is that showing up more where you're not relying on someone else to point something to you as much as you're able to go with the tools? See, that empowers you, and it empowers us not to be dependent, like not to keep going back. But if we don't grab the tools on our side, if we don't have that empowerment, you can see why we would keep going back, because we're literally disempowered in that.
And now also I'm maybe free from, call it shadow boxing the previous teaching, like seeing the limitations in it and being like, yeah, whatever. I can a little bit more free from that, and I can appreciate it, but I don't need it so much. I don't need it, and I can see the limitation and the strengths of various things. And I think that we are coming out to your time, but I would really love to do a part 2 on this, to get more. I want to talk more next time on this, actually some actual inquiries. And also there is this wonderful concept that I never encountered from anybody. It's trying to process the drivers to work with the preoccupation first. Preoccupation, even I think in regular psychology, they talk about it, focused on the substance and this or that, focus on where to get it, when, all that, desire. And what I liked from your approach is that you realize this preoccupation is a mixture of two fighting forces. I want it, I need it, I want it. And then I shouldn't have it. I shouldn't have it. It's not good for you. What the fuck? Don't do it. So you have this nice methodology before going to the drivers to unpack the preoccupation and take it separate. Pull out the longing, the craving, and then pull out the aversion, not wanting, that they keep fighting. And actually, I think from one angle, this fighting of the two forces is a driver in itself, right?
Yeah. It is. You know, I was just working with someone, and I won't give out way the like details of this, but I'll just say this. He had a sexual compulsion, which would be like taboo. It would be something that society doesn't condone. So there's shaming coming from society. And then that developed not only, well, he already had the craving for the thing, but now he's got this aversion to it. I'm wrong if I do it. So strangely, the compulsion came down by working on the story that he shouldn't do it, which is almost completely counterintuitive because almost everything else would say, you need to do, you don't need to help him with that. He needs to keep that story so he doesn't act out on it. But keeping that story is what made him want to act out on it. So just saying things like, okay, inquiry. So it's fine to have this desire for this. Like, no, compulsion high, compulsion strong, compulsion strong. And then getting to the place where it's like, okay, it's fine to have this desire, and then the compulsion low. So there's a good example of how you might not realize it, but your desire. I saw it when I was in recovery, because once you're in recovery and you put down the drugs and alcohol, I was sober for 8 years. I just total sobriety for 8 years. What I noticed was a preoccupation with not using it.
Oh, wow.
That's what I saw.
That's what I like saying, that by doing this work, you are becoming free from using and free from not using.
Options for either one.
So you can potentially enjoy something out of celebration. So I would like to have another part on that, going also into each driver, going more how to use the they call it in Hakomi the urge, how to surf the urge and to mine out the urge, and to how to actually, how you said it, to inquire before. Okay, I'm going to still use, but inquire before and after, and to go into more actual how. And so I will put in this recording at the bottom, maybe 1 or 2 of Scott's videos, that they are like 1-hour videos on addiction work, that it's kind of almost everything is in there, and they will be useful. And also this is part 9, so there are 8 parts. And we'll talk next time about also the somatic no. It's an important as a result of the drivers diminishing. If I go for the thing, this happens to me with tobacco. I used to be addicted to tobacco, but now I smoke a little bit. I was like, it's like my body says, dude, what the fuck? No. So this can happen more and more.
Yeah, we should maybe talk about shame or do a little inquiries on it, because I think people are surprised at how the shame work helps so much.
Shame. If everybody knew, because this I'm using secrecy. And the pressure and perceiving judged from. All right, Scott. Thank you. We'll do it next time soon.